just showing them these pictures of one of the beer permits. I went by there Wednesday, and I got my book. I don't know if he owned it on Wednesday, but he was selling beer already stored there. So I'm going to ask the applicants. I would have made copies for everybody, but I thought they were pulling it. So you thought what? I thought they were pulling both the first two applications. They only pulled one, or I would have brought everybody a copy. So I apologize. No problem.
Patrick, let's go ahead and get this thing started. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting, business meeting for this evening, January 14th, 2019. We welcome all those that are here this evening in attendance. We wish you a happy new year. It's never too late to say that. This is our first meeting of the year for 2019. A few highlights about this evening's meeting. We will meet as a beer board this evening. We'll also have on the agenda election of our vice mayor and also a purchase of a fire engine as well. This evening, our invocation will be led by Public Works Director Bo Mills, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Alderman Massey. Please rise.
Let us pray. Good evening, Heavenly Father. We just thank you for such a good day. We thank you for your love and your mercy and your grace and your forgiveness and just for being our creator and our sustainer. Just thank you for this new year. Thank you for this board, these public servants that stand before us tonight. They'll conduct the business of this, our city. What a great city we have. Wonderful place to live, work, play, even worship. We just thank you for that great benefit. Just ask, Lord, for your blessings on our meeting tonight. Provide wisdom and grace. And, Lord, be with staff as they are out doing their work. We pray these things in your precious name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Prior to officially setting our meeting and setting our agenda, I'd like to take note, and for those in attendance and those watching at home, we do have a new board member, and we also have a new city attorney, so I'd like to welcome both those individuals. Mac McCarroll is our city attorney, was recently appointed to that position in December, and this is his first actual meeting as attorney, so we welcome you. And as such, we have a service pin that hopefully that you will wear with great pride. And we'd like to welcome Alderman Position 1, Scott Sanders, to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We're very excited to have him on board and know that he will do great work for the city of Germantown. I'd like to present you with your pen.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to item number 4 on the agenda, setting of the agenda. The agenda is printed to the public ahead of time and presented in many forms to the public. This evening in executive session, the board requested to move some items around on the agenda and a couple of other notations to make. Item 9A, public hearing beer permit for off-premise application at Exxon Food Mart has been pulled by the applicant. So item 9A will no longer be on the beer board nor on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen's agenda this evening. Item 10D, Professional Services Agreement, Supplement Number 2, Final Closeout, Right-of-Way Appraisals, Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road, Intersection Improvements Project, has also been requested to be pulled from the consent agenda and then presented on the regular agenda. That item will become item 11 on the agenda. So item 10D will now become item 11. Now, item 11, it was requested by the board to move to the consent agenda, and so those two items will, in essence, flip-flop. Item 11 will become item 10D. D on the agenda, so please make note of that. Also, item 10E, Professional Services Agreement, Supplement Number 4, Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road intersection improvements, was also requested to be pulled from consent, and that will be heard as item number 19 on the agenda this evening. So again, item 10E will now become item 19 on the regular agenda. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as modified?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Young?
Yes.
The agenda has been set for this evening. Takes us to item number 5 on the agenda, approval of the minutes. We have minutes to approve from 2 separate meetings held last year. First meeting on December the 10th, 2018, the regular Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting. There were no modifications or changes in executive session. Are there any at this particular time?
Mayor, I'd like to raise a point of order.
Sure.
I sent an email to the board earlier today with comments that I received from citizens who feel like the board may have violated the open meetings law by changing the agenda at the special meetings to include a vote that actually changed our rules, whereby aldermen are now limited to 2 5-minute rounds, whereas before we each had 10-minute rounds to speak. The citizen requested that we declare those actions null and void.
What is the particular point of order on item 5A, December 10th, 2018, regular meeting minutes on that particular item? That's what we're on right now.
I believe we violated the Tennessee open meetings law, and so I'm not sure that the actions that we took at that meeting should be approved. Now, whether or not we take action now to declare that, to make a motion and declare it null and void, I don't know.
We have 2 meeting minutes that we are reviewing, the 10th and the 18th. I think your point
I may be on the wrong one on the 18th.
Would be better suited for
the special called meeting.
I believe the 18th.
I skipped ahead to the December 18th meeting. You're correct.
Is there a motion to approve the December 10th, 2018 regular agenda meeting minutes as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
The minutes have been approved. That brings us to item 5B on the agenda, the December 18th, 2018 special called meeting minutes. During executive session, there were no modifications, no discussion, or any corrections made at that particular time. Is there a motion to approve the December?
Mayor, I'd raise the same point of order.
Like anything we do in all the meetings we've taken part in the last few years, let's get the motion on the table, and then if there's discussion, modifications, amendments, then we'll move from there. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the December 18th, 2018 special called meeting?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Open for discussion.
Raise the same point of order.
Chair recognizes you. Go ahead, Alderman.
Same point of order that I raised earlier. I forwarded an email with comments from a citizen who thinks that we violated the Tennessee open meetings law by amending the agenda to include a vote on the amount of time that each alderman is allowed to speak at the meetings. The request by the citizen is simply that we provide additional notice, take a new vote at one of the regular meetings, and determine and debate whether or not it's prudent to limit the amount of time that we're each allowed to speak. So the question, I think, is it appropriate to approve the minutes if they were indeed in violation of the Tennessee open meetings law? And has anyone with the city, has city council reviewed that issue?
It's just news to me as of right now, so I would think that probably there has not been any review. But
only briefly, I got it right before coming down here today. I think the issue is not the minutes being right or wrong. The minutes are going to be the minutes. It's the ramifications of what happened when those minutes were generated and whether or not the board had the authority, as reflected by those minutes, to do what it did.
So is now the appropriate time to ask the board to declare to declare that action null and void, or do we do that after the minutes are approved? I mean,
That would be after the minutes are approved, because the board the motion before the board is to approve the minutes or not to approve the minutes. What the minutes result in is what I understand that you have a problem with. The question then becomes, did the board have that authority? And that's not for us to decide here today. We're just deciding whether those minutes say what those minutes are supposed to say.
So when is the appropriate time to take the action that was requested of the board? And it's not that I had the problem, you know, that a citizen contacted me. I voted against the change, but at the same time, a citizen has contacted us and asked us to declare that action null and void. And so I'm looking for the proper procedure to move forward with that action.
That action would at some point, to the extent there are questions of fact, whether there was adequate notice, things of that nature, that would be for a finder of fact later if there were a lawsuit over it. But until that time, the board, as a board, deciding whether or not the board actually had the authority to create a special rule of order would be the way to do it internally. And I think, you know, we ought to be able to look at that together and see what authority there is for setting special orders, special rules of order. Because the rules of order speak to a board being allowed to limit its people to 5 minutes per day per issue. We just need to look at how it was done and what was done and see if we can't come to an agreement about how to handle it.
Well, Mayor, I think rather than making any official motion today, if you could just agree that you'll have staff take a look at that and come back with a recommendation for the board, I think that would provide us with some guidance.
That's fine. You know, we traditionally request attorney opinions, and I have no problem with that. If you'll render an opinion in the next couple of weeks, would be great, Mr. Attorney.
Glad to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this particular item? It's been motioned and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
The minutes have been approved. That concludes item number 5 on the agenda. We move to item number 6, citizens to be heard. Clerk Betty, any? Okay. That takes us to item number 7 this evening, special recognition. We have 2 items this evening. Both of them involve education. We have the Teacher of the Month and the Youth Excellence Award winner of the month. Vice Mayor Gibson, would you be able to handle those, please?
I will. Thank you, Mayor. And if I could ask Ruth Crawford to come forward. Ruth is actually on our Beautification Commission, but has agreed to help this evening. And if I could have Mr. Jason Middlecoff come forward. It is indeed an honor for the Germantown Education Commission to present the December 2018 Teacher of the Month Award to Mr. Jason Middlecoff. Mr. Middlecoff teaches 9th grade honors English at Houston High School. Described as a master teacher and a master of communication skills, Mr. Middlecoff practices the art and science of teaching both inside and outside of the classroom. As a teacher at Houston High, Mr. Middlecoff is an advocate for his colleagues and his students. He is actively involved in planning and designing the 9th grade English curriculum to both meet state requirements and to ensure Houston students reach their maximum potential. Outside of class, Mr. Middlecoff sponsors the Houston Speech and Debate Team. An avid and fast runner, Mr. Middlecoff is also a talented member of Short in the Sleeve, a local band. Through his classroom and extracurricular interactions, Mr. Middlecoff fosters meaningful and inspiring relationships with students and their families. He clearly has his students' best interest at heart. Mr. Middlecoff, please accept our appreciation for your commitment to Germantown students and to excellence every day. Your award is sponsored by Principal Toyota. Thank you so much. And if I could have Ms. Brooke Foreman come forward, please. The December 2018 Youth Excellence Award is presented to Brooke Foreman, a senior at Briarcrest Christian School. Brooke was described to the commission members as an encourager, well-respected, and a team player. Brooke is actively engaged in academics at Briarcrest. She was selected by the Briarcrest faculty to be part of the National Who's Who organization, one of only 6 seniors selected based on their outstanding contributions to campus life, academics, and extracurricular activities. She has a 4.17 GPA and is a member of the National Spanish Honor Society, the Spanish Club, the Wilson Society, which is a Briarcrest Community Service Club, Briarcrest Students Affecting Change, and the Senior Buddies Club, which is a mentoring opportunity for students. Brooke is a 3-year member of the varsity cheerleading team and has lettered twice in both tennis and cross country. She has also participated in Student Leadership University for the past 3 summers, where she learned leadership principles and how to apply them in her everyday life. Not only is Brooke a scholar athlete, she's active in her church and her community. She's a regular volunteer for Las Americas, an after-school program for Hispanic youth in Shelby County, and Mission 1-8 Day, which is a school-sponsored day of service to the Memphis community. She is an experienced missionary with her church, having served on mission trips to Brazil and Ecuador, where her mastery of Spanish was put to good use. It is clear that Brooke has a servant's heart because she models a lifestyle of serving others, both at school, in her church, and in her community. She is a person of utmost character and integrity. Brooke represents the best of Germantown. She's dedicated to her academic studies, extracurricular activities, and community service. In recognition of her commitment to academic excellence, character, and service, the Germantown Education Commission is proud to present Brooke Foreman with the December 2018 Germantown Youth Excellence Award.
Mr. Middlecoff and Ms. Foreman, we congratulate you. We also admire the amount of dedication and work that you both have as teacher and as student. And on behalf of the citizens of Germantown, our board, and the Education Commission, we do salute and congratulate you again. And also, this is maybe the best part of my congratulatory remarks. You can stay for the next 10 items, or you can probably leave if you like right now. So if you'd like to stay, please stay, but if not, you will not hurt our feelings. So thank you and congratulations again. Item 8 on the agenda are the Alderman Liaison reports. We go from Alderman position 1 through position 5. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification Commission met Monday evening. We welcomed 3 new members, Ms. Martha Flanagan, Steve Busnick, and Fred Dyer. The Commission confirmed the budget request for FY20, which will be presented to the Financial Advisory Commission in the coming weeks. The Commission approved Albert Pope to be our liaison to the Tree Board. We also conducted a post-evaluation of the 2018 holiday decorations and events and approved the purchase of trees for this year's Arbor Day event that's set for Friday, March the 1st in the Huey's parking lot across the street. We'll also have fruit trees out at the farm park that day. The next meeting's scheduled for February 4th. The Germantown Public Safety Education Commission met also last Monday for their first meeting of the year. They welcomed new members Michael Threlkeld and John Vaden. They reviewed meeting procedures, code of ethics, and sunshine law, as most all commissions will do at the first of the year. They elected a vice chair, Terry Griffith. Also, they were presented with the police report for November and December. We were told of a great number of break-ins in vehicles, unlocked cars, so the commission is considering a Lock It or Lose It or Keep Germantown Safe campaign in the coming year. We'll meet and get more information to the board on that and make a recommendation. The Fire Marshal's Office reported 4,428 calls during 2018, which was 200 more than in 2017. 70% were EMS calls and 30 were fire calls. I along with the Public Safety Education Commission, want to thank all of our first responders for what they do for our citizens that live here, our business owners, and our visitors. So thank you all. Due to a conflict in our scheduling, since I'm the liaison for both of those commissions, this commission has decided to move their meetings to the first Tuesday of each month so I can attend that and not have conflict with the Beautification Commission. Senior Commission meets Thursday afternoon, and that completes my report.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Good report, Alderman. Thank you. I appreciated that. The Board of Zoning Appeals will not meet in January or February as there were no applications submitted. Education Commission will meet tomorrow night to continue plans for the Battle of the Brains STEM competition to be held at Houston High School on March 30th, where students will vie for the prized Einstein Trophy. The Library Board will meet tomorrow. The library, in partnership with the city, will kick off the Big Read this Saturday with events taking place citywide focusing on the book The Namesake by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jhumpa Lahiri. The Public Art Commission will meet for the very first time this Thursday afternoon at GPAC, and I did see on the agenda where it called for new business and even old business, so we're going to focus on that new business. They are very excited about that commission. Neighborhood Preservation Commission will meet this Thursday night to begin planning for the very successful and informative tour of remodeled homes and landscapes this spring. More details to come on that event soon. The Parks and Recreation Commission, I am very excited to be returning as liaison to the Parks and Rec Commission. They'll hold their first meeting of 2019 next Thursday, January 24th at 5:30 in the Parks and Recreation offices, where they'll be setting a date for a special work session to be held sometime in February with the Parks and Rec Master Plan Steering Committee to consider possible potential updates to the plan. And that's my report, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, my commissions did not have any meetings, and I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Owens.
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission met on January 8th and approved a site plan for the new Houston High School field house and the concession stands and phasing for the other improvements on the property. The Design Review Commission is going to meet on January 22nd. Also, the Planning Commission approved some amendments to our parkland dedication ordinance. And that is my report.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you. And just briefly from the mayor's office, I'd just like to highlight and thank our community, our residents, and our visitors. We had another banner month of sales tax collection. The numbers for December, and generally when we get those numbers, they come in January. And so the numbers for December are at 12% over budget. We collected $928,000, and it is very much indicative of the strong economic presence that we have in Germantown. Also, we made an announcement recently. I know there's always been a lot of talk about wanting to have more restaurants, fast casual, tavern style, and white tablecloth. Coming soon to Germantown is Mike Miller's Let It Fly Sports Bar, Burger Fi, Rock and Roll Sushi, where I believe Alderman Yonda and Sanders were both there for the ribbon cutting last week, Nuke's Eatery, Moon Dance, both of those located in Thornwood, Chicken Salad Chick, which will be located over in front of Trader Joe's, coupled with the openings we've had in the last year of Southern Social, Farm and Fries, and Casablanca. Germantown's in good shape when it comes to dining choices by far. So we are very excited to see in February will be our true December numbers, and I understand there's an office pool going on whether we break the record of I think 1,250,000 or so, and you're at $1.7 million, are you not?
I'm at $1.8 million, Mayor. I'm way out there.
I'm going with $1, so you can't win if you go over. So anyway, that concludes my remarks this evening, and also concludes Alderman Liaison reports as well. We will take a temporary short recess of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and now we will convene as the Germantown Beer Board. Again, as mentioned earlier, item 9A was withdrawn by the applicant. That brings us to item 9B, public hearing, beer permit, off-premise application, Poplar Food Mart number 1. Mr. Lawton.
Excuse me, Mayor and members of the board, the city has received a request from Poplar Investments, Inc. for a permit to sell beer for off-premise consumption at the location Noted in your agenda sheet, Poplar Food Mart number 1, located at 7616 Poplar Avenue. As part of our due diligence in looking at beer applications and permits, you have in your packet the beer application itself, the necessary background check that was conducted by the Germantown Police Department, the confirmation that this area is in fact, or this location is in fact compliant with the zoning ordinance, and the necessary public notice that was in the paper advertising this meeting and public hearing before the board this evening. Based upon our review and from the police department standpoint, there's nothing that has come back to discredit the applicants at this time. However, there was an issue regarding the actual application itself that is up for clarification this evening. It was question number 14 regarding citizenship in the United States. And I'm going to ask City Attorney Mac McCarroll to comment on that and what needs to be satisfied for the board to continue to consider this item.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Mayor and Board, the applicant erroneously checked on item 14 that he had not been a citizen or lawful resident of the United States for at least a year. I understand that that's a little bit confusing as it's written in the item to request the check, but my understanding is the applicant is here tonight and willing to swear under oath that he has been a citizen and lawful resident of the United States for over a year. That was the only insufficiency in the application, and I believe that if he will initial and sign a new page for the questionnaire that has number 14 on it and have Ms. Betty notarize it as having been sworn to and subscribed here today, that satisfies the requirement.
Any other part of the presentation this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there a motion to approve the request of Poplar Investments Incorporated for a permit to sell beer for off-premise consumption at Poplar Food Mart number 1, located at 7616 Poplar Avenue?
Move to approve.
It's a motion.
I'll second it.
It's a motion and a second. If the applicants, I know the applicants are here this evening, if they could come down and sit in the first couple of chairs close to the podium, and you may be requested to ask or answer questions here shortly. But before that, this requires a public meeting, so at this time I will open a public meeting or public hearing to speak to this particular item on the agenda. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak on the beer permit for off-premise application at Poplar Food Mart number 1? Anyone in attendance who would like to speak to this particular item? Last call. Seeing no one come forward, the public hearing portion of this agenda item is now concluded. The floor is open to the board to ask questions of staff or the applicant.
I have a question, Mayor.
I'll recognize you, Mr. Sanders. Go ahead.
I would like to ask the applicant a couple of questions.
You could come forward, make sure that the microphone, the green light is on, and get it, it's down at the base, and just have that where you can speak into it. You do not have to state your name and address. It's already in the record. Go ahead, Alderman.
Sir, I'd like to know, do you currently own this property?
No, I don't.
When will you own the property?
I will be leasing this property once I have the license approved.
Okay, you'll lease the property
I
whenever
have-
this license is approved?
I have the lease, but the commencement date will be once I have the licenses in my
Okay.
hand approved.
I asked because I went by the location. I noticed they're currently selling beer at this location and storing beer at this location. So that's under the current license that's there,
Yeah,
correct?
it is currently being operated by, I believe, Tennessee Management.
So does this current owner know that when, if we act on this application tonight and approve it, that his application would be null and void, and as of whenever this license issued, that he is no longer allowed to sell alcohol?
Right, the day the license is approved, I will plan for taking over immediately.
Okay. I do have one question for our attorney. We indicated we would ensure that he complies with our section 3-81 paren 4 by signing a new form, but would it, I'm not sure what the original application looks like. The one I have in my book The back of that page has his signature attesting that the rest of the answers are true and correct. So should he execute a new form or initial this one is incorrect?
I think if we can get it done quickly, a new form would be the best way to do it. If Ms. Betty can put that together.
Well, I didn't know if he could just scratch out the no and initial and then make
That's
check
kind of what
mark.
we're doing. We're just adding a new page where he is swearing that he has been a citizen or lawful resident for 1 year. He will check it and
With
then.
just that
and
question,
she'll-
14.
And she'll notarize this page, and that'll go in
It'll be an
as the
attachment to
official
this.
page. But it's now on the record, so it'll be clear that that's what we were doing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant? It's been properly motioned and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mayor, excuse me,
Yes.
could we get him to execute this form first before we vote? Because currently what I have before me says he's not a citizen
All
for
right,
a year.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor.
Clerk, if you'd call the roll at your leisure.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
You have approval. Welcome to our city. We hope that you do well and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brings us to item 9C on the agenda, public hearing, beer permit, on-premise application, Rock and Roll Sushi. The applicant is here. If he would come forward and sit in the first seats and be ready if called upon.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawton.
Mayor and members of the board, this is a new permit for this location, and the city has received a request from Mr. Ronald Craig Estes for a permit to sell beer for on-premise consumption at Rock and Roll Sushi located at 9155 Poplar Avenue, number 19. As identified in the other application before the board this evening, you have attached the beer permit application completed by the applicant, the necessary background check completed by the Germantown Police Department. Nothing is compact to discredit the applicant in that regard. There is a letter, an email from Economic and Community Development regarding a confirmation of zoning, and also the ad Michelle Betty places in the paper regarding tonight's public notice. The applicant is in compliance with the ordinance, and the administration recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve the request of Ronald Craig Estes for a permit to sell beer for on-premise consumption at Rock and Roll Sushi located at 9155 Poplar Avenue, Suite 19?
Move to approve.
So motion by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Alderman Yonda. There's now a necessity for a public hearing, and as such, I will open the public hearing. Anyone present would like to come forward and speak to this particular item to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on-premise application for Rock and Roll Sushi? Anyone like to come forward and speak to this item? See no one come forward. That concludes the public hearing portion of this item. And now we return to debate or discussion. Any questions for staff or the applicant? It's been properly moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion carries, and we welcome you to the city and hope that you do well and we get a lot more sales tax revenue. Thank you. All right.
What time do you open tomorrow? 11 a.m.
Thank you.
That brings us to the consent agenda, and as mentioned earlier, there are a few items that were pulled from the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the following items. Item 10A, contract extension, club management software, Germantown Athletic Club. Item 10B, donations, Germantown Community Library. Item 10C, grants, Germantown Regional History and Genealogy Center. Item D was pulled, and substituted with item 11, appointments to the boards and commissions for the following: Education Commission, Neighborhood Preservation Commission, RPAC and OPED Commission, Senior Citizens Advisory Commission. Item E, as mentioned earlier, was also pulled and placed on the traditional agenda. Item F, purchase fuel transport trailer. Item G, purchase Google G Suite annual licensing. Item H, reimbursement overtime for police. Item I, reimbursement payment number 1, GMSD Riverdale Boiler Chiller renovation projects. Everything on the consent agenda was thoroughly reviewed by the board and also presented in executive session. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified?
So moved.
It's a motion.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Consent agenda is approved. Brings us to item number 12 on the agenda this evening. Double check that. Number 11 is item C on the agenda. I'm sorry, item 11 is now item 12. Let's see here. Got me confused. We now are going over item D on the agenda, Professional Services Agreement, Supplement Number 2, Final Closeout, Right-of-Way Appraisals, Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road, Intersection Improvements Projects. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor. As discussed during the executive session, this is the final closeout for the right-of-way and appraisal work. As the board will recall, there were significant numbers of property that had to be, at least a total of 31 properties that had to be appraised for acquisition by the city in relationship to the intersection improvements at Wolf River Boulevard and Germantown Road. The board approved a contract in 2016 with the company by the name of Bolden and Associates in the amount of $156,500 to do this appraisal work on behalf of the state of Tennessee and behalf of the city of Germantown. The state of Tennessee, as the board knows, is fully funding this project at 100%. This last appraisal was necessary on track 14, which was originally appraised, but because we are entering into, or the state is entering into condemnation and will be a partner of that with this particular track, the state requested that the city get another reappraisal of this property, primarily because the state will be headed to condemnation on track 14. So at the request of the state of Tennessee, City of Germantown Administration, Mr. Gwaltney's office, we requested the same appraiser to do the reappraisal of this track number 14 before you, which has increased then the overall professional services agreement with Bolden and Associates for an amount of 156 to the 162 before you this evening. This project is being fully funded by the state of Tennessee. We were acting on behalf of the state to have this reappraisal done, and they will reimburse the city the entire expenditure associated with this reappraisal.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Questions for staff on this particular item? Is there a motion to approve supplement number 2 in the amount of $6,000, increasing the professional services agreement with Bolden Associates from $156,500 to $162,500 for property appraisal services related to the Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road intersection improvements project and final closeout of the project? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion or questions on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Motion carries. Brings us to item 12 on the agenda. Change order number 2, Forest Hill Irene Road Improvements, construction contract. City Engineer Tim Gwaltney.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this agenda item is to consider approval of change order number 2 in the amount of $37,631.33, increasing the construction contract for the Forest Hill Irene Improvements Project with ACUF Enterprises doing business as Scott Contractors from $6,113,785.55 to $6,151,416.88, and adding 4 days to the overall construction timeline. The city originally entered into the construction contract with Scott Contractors in August of 18. Since that time, the major operations to date have been clearing of trees and other obstructions on both sides of the roadway over the entire length of the project. Dirt work has commenced on the northern portion of the project from Forest Hill Downs to Poplar Pike, which contains the new elementary school site, which is under construction now. The northern section of the project is scheduled to be completed when the new school is set to open, which is August of this year. Change order number 2 consists of 2 items. The first item is the installation of fiber optics to connect the signalized intersections of Forest Hill and Poplar Pike and Forest Hill and Winchester with the larger network. Currently, these signals operate independently of the coordinated timing network of nearby signals at Poplar at Forest Hill, Poplar at Village Shops, and also Poplar at Johnson. Knowing that the increased traffic generated by the new school would necessitate the capability to coordinate the timing of these signals with the surrounding ones, fiber optics was included in the project. However, the plans for the fiber optics was not 100% complete at the time the project was put out for construction bids. The bidders were instructed to include $75,000 allowance in their bids for the project, and that the low bidder would be required to obtain 3 bids for fiber optic installation when the plans were completed. After being awarded the roadway construction project, Scott Contractors obtained those 3 bids from 3 qualified vendors for the installation of the fiber optics. DeSoto Electric provided the lowest qualified bid at $91,487.50. Scott Contractors will be paid that invoice amount plus 3%. So the total cost of this item on change order 2 is $19,232.13, and that is derived from the quote amount plus 3% minus a $75,000 allowance. The next item relates to a 54-inch diameter culvert, which is located within the northern portion of the project. The original plan for the existing 54-inch diameter concrete culvert was to leave it in place and extend each end of that culvert to accommodate the road widening. However, after the roadside was cleared on both sides and the existing culvert was fully and easily accessible, closer field inspection of the culvert revealed that there were severe pipe joint separations as well as offsets in those joints, which necessitated a complete replacement of that existing pipe. The cost of the culvert replacement is $18,399.20. After that cost was determined, we met with City Administrator Patrick Lawton to make him aware of the situation. After that meeting, we instructed the contractor to proceed as soon as possible due to the fact that that location was in the northern section and is the most time-critical portion of this project. Staff respectfully request approval of change order number 2 in the total amount of $37,631.33, also adding 4 days to the overall construction timeline, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gwaltney. Is there a motion to approve change order number 2 in the amount of $37,631.33, increasing the construction contract for the construction of Forest Hill Irene roadway improvements project with ACUF Enterprises DBA Scott Contractors from $6,113,785.55 to $6,151,416.88, and adding 4 additional days to the time to complete. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions for staff? Alderman Yonda.
Yes, where does this put us on our budget? Are we
At this
getting-
point, we're $37,000 over.
So we don't have any extra money for anywhere? We've used all up?
No, sir. The budget for construction was closer to $7 million. The actual bids came in at 6.1. So I'm saying we're $37,000 over the contract amount, but not
the
over the
7 million
overall
that we set
budget.
aside, basically.
Yes.
And we
Right,
reviewed
we're not
last
having to hit contingency or take money from another project for this.
We have not.
Correct, we have not.
That's
Have not,
correct.
okay. So with all our property acquisition and stuff, we're still okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I'm good. I couldn't find it in the book, I'm sorry.
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Alderman Sanders.
So, Mr. Waltney, I'm guessing the reason that we authorized this work prior to getting approval from the board, because that's a large amount of money, you're relying on, in our charter, the provision that to delay this approval and waiting to come to the board first, or deferring the action was less beneficial to the city?
Delaying the project would have been less beneficial, correct.
I asked that question because I had a problem with that, and I came tonight prepared to amend the motion to split these out because I could vote for the fiber optic with no problem. But if I thought we didn't follow our procedures according to our charter, I would not be able to vote for this portion of the pipe since it's already been installed. But what would have happened if we had delayed and you would have brought this today and we then approved it and then they could install it? What would be the consequence?
About a 6-week delay, which we did not have the luxury of having a 6-week delay. It would not have shut the project down completely, but it would have stopped work in that immediate area of the culvert. So, again, we just...
And so by going ahead and authorizing the installation of this pipe only adds 4 days to the construction time, whereas if you had waited for our approval tonight, it would add 6 weeks? That's
Yes,
what
sir.
you're telling me? Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff on this particular item? Vice Mayor Gibson.
Tim, can you remind us what the original construction timeline as far as the completion date is?
Yes, for the northern section, the project began construction in September. They are to be complete by August of 2019. The overall construction timeline, all the way to Winchester, is a total of 18 months, which started in September of 18.
So our friends at GMSD are August of 2019. Those are very date specifics as far as when do we have that specific date?
Last week of July.
Last week of July. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Every day counts. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Alderman Yonda.
We still have $7 million budgeted for this, is that correct? Or did we adjust our?
Yes, and
Okay,
that's where,
okay.
when Mr. Grotley was talking about
Right,
where the
the
additional
contract
funds are
versus
coming from.
budget. Okay, so-
And had we not, you would have seen attached to this agenda sheet would have been a budget adjustment.
A budget adjustment, okay, I got you.
Hitting contingency or hitting another project.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for the additional questions there.
Any other questions for staff?
Mayor,
Alderman Massey.
what was the specific date that the need for the additional work was discovered?
In late November, right around Thanksgiving.
And so was there not another board meeting after the date that this was discovered and the date that the money was approved?
There was the first meeting in December. At that time, we did not have cost estimates.
I guess my question would be, or if I had a wish, my wish would be that maybe in the future the administration would at least put the board on notice that you're anticipating the need for this money rather than simply approving it and then coming to us after the fact and requesting the money. I think that would be fair. Mm-hmm. The other question I had, you mentioned that there was something that was not in the bid package for the fiber optics originally. So what part of the project was not included in that original bid package?
No, the actual schematic of the fiber optics was not included at that time. The notes in the plans and in the line items were planning for fiber optics, and again, the bidders were instructed, I mean, whoever the low bidder is for the roadway construction project, in this case it was Scott Contractors, will be required to get 3 quotes for the fiber optics.
But when you were talking earlier, you said that there was a part of the project that was not included when the job was bid. Or that's the way I heard it. If that's not the way you meant it, then maybe we can clarify that, because somebody else might have misunderstood that as well.
If I said fiber optics was not included, that's an error. Fiber optics was included.
The way I heard it is that there was a part of the fiber optics, there was a part of the project that wasn't contemplated at the time or had not been included. Is that what does that trigger your memory?
Not related to the fiber optics, but was the statement related to the culvert, saying the original plan for the culvert was to leave the existing culvert in place and extend it on each end. But after we had full access to it, then and found out the true condition of that existing pipe, then we changed the plan to replace it.
Okay, so maybe if you could just explain again why we had the change order for the fiber optics that resulted in the additional $19,232.
Because the 100% plans for the fiber optics was not completed at the time the project was put out for bids. So to make everything fair for the bidders, we gave them a dollar amount to include in their bids, that $75,000 allowance for fiber optics. So when the low bidder for the roadway was determined, then they went and got the 3 quotes for the fiber optics.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff on this particular item? It's been motioned and properly seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Gwaltney. Thank you, Board. On behalf of the administration, we appreciate your support. Opening school in the middle of September is not an option for us, so occasionally some of these emergency purchases and things have to occur. This one particularly involved the school getting open on time. That brings us to agenda item number 13 on the agenda. Annually, we elect a vice mayor to serve in the capacity of mayor as needed, and if there is some type of permanent loss of the mayor. So at this time, I'd open the floor for nominations. Alderman Yonda.
I'd like to nominate Mary Ann Gibson, please. It's an honor to nominate her, in fact, for a 3rd term.
There's a motion to nominate Alderman Mary Ann Gibson for vice mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations for vice mayor at this particular time? Nominations are closed. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
That was a reluctant yes.
It was not a reluctant yes.
We appreciate your service, and I can tell you personally, from personal knowledge, that none of us can make it to everything, and so in the absence of me being in an official duty or to carry on the work of the city or to provide signature that's needed at times, I do appreciate the work that you've done over the last couple of years and now a third year. So congratulations again. Takes us to item number 14 on the agenda, grant for Leadership Germantown. Mr. Lawton.
Yes, Mayor and Board. Leadership Germantown was developed actually in '95, but the first class graduated in 1996, and it started out as a joint venture between the City of Germantown and the Germantown Chamber of Commerce, and the program was really modeled off of a lot of leadership programs that were already in place in other local governments across the state of Tennessee, and it was also modeled after what some state programs were doing regarding leadership development and training. Over the years, the Leadership Germantown board has now moved more to a, well, not more to a, but it is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. The board members consist of past graduates from the Leadership Germantown class, so you constantly have people who are very passionate about Leadership Germantown and are now serving on the Leadership Germantown board. It is a 6-month leadership development program with 12 classes. The board members who serve on the Leadership Germantown board are the ones actually responsible for working on the curriculum, developing what that day session is going to look like, whether it's a day in public safety, a day of education, going to Nashville to meet with the General Assembly and the governor. But the board members are very much hands-on. In addition to that, the board members are also looking for donations and contributions to help make the program operate. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the City of Germantown has been gracious over the past number of years to provide a grant to Leadership Germantown to help support those efforts. Last year, that grant amount was increased to $13,600 to help support the program. So what does Leadership Germantown do? Well, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of graduates over the program since 1996. Most of the members of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are past graduates from the Leadership Germantown program, and you can see what it's done for them in terms of their continuation of their public and their civic duties and responsibilities to support this community. But that doesn't necessarily mean if you go through the program you need to move forward and become an elected official. It's amazing training for those people who want to just get back to the community and be involved, whether it's in their homeowners association, applying for a board or commission, or just having a better understanding of how their city works. And as I mentioned during the executive session, the City of Germantown, we absolutely see the value in Leadership Germantown, because one of the things it does is it absolutely clarifies that, yes, this is called Leadership Germantown, but the City of Germantown is just another spoke in this entire wheel that makes up the larger City of Germantown. You've got education, you've got the educational component, you have the business component, our relationship with the county and the state. So it's not just about the city. It's trying to educate and inform future leaders in our community, no matter at what level, of what leadership opportunities are available in our community, and how our community looks and how it focuses, and the emphasis we place on grooming the next set of leaders. So before you this evening is a grant request in the amount of $13,600 coming out of the civic support line item in the budget, which is a budgeted item in this year's FY19 budget. We have representatives from Leadership Germantown here this evening. Our new program coordinator, I introduced him during the executive session, Mr. Andrew Israel. Good, Andrew. And we also have, who's that back there? Dr. Bo Adams, who is also a very active member on our board. Yes, he's got a haircut since the last time he saw him. Mayor, that's my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I know these two gentlemen would be happy to participate as well. One other thing I will mention, we've had the good fortune in the Leadership Germantown program over the years to have city employees actually want to get involved and participate in the Leadership Germantown program. And we have 3 city employees in the program this year. Mr. Jason Heisman, you can imagine the benefit of this program, meeting individuals throughout the community and getting a greater exposure. Andy Sanders, the Assistant Public Works Director, is a member of the class this year. And again, Andy's been with us a couple of years, and Jessica Comas in Marketing Communications is a member as a city. These are 3 city employees who are very anxious to participate in this program. Again, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve payment of a budgeted grant to Leadership Germantown in the amount of $13,600?
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
There's a motion by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Alderman Yonda. Any discussion or questions for staff? Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
Just wanted to clarify, I think I heard the city administrator saying this agenda item was to authorize a budgeted grant, but the motion actually says to make the payment. So that was already granted in the last budget, correct?
It was approved in the budget when the board adopted the budget the end of June. However, the authorization of providing the funding now comes before this body. I can't make that grant, as any other purchase and things come forward, but the funding is included in the FY19 budget, and now it's before you to authorize
The transfer.
cutting the check. Yeah.
Okay, I was just making sure I understood it that way. I knew I was not part of the board that approved the grant in the budget previously, but this is just approval of the writing the check. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Alderman Massey is recognized.
Mr. Lawton, am I the only person on the dais tonight that is not a member of Leadership Germantown or the Alumni Association?
I believe so, Alderman Massey. I don't know if you've been through the class in a prior, but I know Alderman Yonda, Owens, Gibson, Sanders, and Mayor Palazzolo are past graduates of the program, and I believe either active in the Alumni Association. I don't know to that extent on the Alumni Association.
And I believe you and Chief Hall, I think, both graduated from, or you're at least a member of the board, but I think Chief Hall graduated from the class.
Chief Hall graduated from it. I've been around enough. I'm a founding member of Leadership Germantown.
Right.
I've been through Leadership Memphis, but not through Leadership Germantown. But I am also on the board of directors.
Is the city attorney also a graduate or not?
I'm not an alumni.
Okay. So we have 2 members up here who are not then. So, well, Mayor, in the past I have opposed the city granting this money to Leadership Germantown, and one of the questions I have for the city attorney or for the city administrator, does the Alumni Association still partially fund Leadership Germantown?
I'm going to turn that question over to our program coordinator and our board member, Dr. Adams, if you 2 gentlemen would like to address that.
Yes, come forward to the middle podium. Make sure the green light is on at the bottom. And you've been recognized, so you don't need to state your name and address for the record. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for letting us come here tonight. We have our new program director, Andrew Israel, whom y'all are meeting currently at the moment there, and he has not done the program himself we're sort of hiring from outside, but he is, I'm going to say, he's going to be the guy who's going to really take the reins, take our program, and not just do the nuts and bolts, but since he's been very involved in the city of Memphis in various things, in development and fundraising and many projects, he's going to be able to take us to another level. I'm sort of circling around before I get back to a specific question, if I might. When I did Leadership Germantown back in 2015, Brian Carney, who's also our president of our board, and I'm the vice president. Brian cannot be here tonight. He apologized. He's out of town on business. But we probably got lucky because Janice Hamill didn't make it tonight either there. So shorter and sweeter. So we did Leadership Germantown. It was a great idea. We learned a lot about the city of Germantown. But we both thought, man, this organization could do a whole lot more. We could do a lot more for the city. If you just look at the projects Leadership Germantown has done, our class raised money for the chalet at the farm park. The next class did the huge project of the fountain relocation. The chessboard at the library was next, and then last year the greenhouse. These are all class projects where the class members themselves go about, raise money, raise funds, get donations to get these projects done. I think if we had a more visible society or group or whatever we call us, and a lot more community involvement and recognition, we'd be able to do even more projects to help our town. We're really working on that, and as I said, Brian and I sort of had that vision, and over the last 2 or 3 years on the board, we've gotten the board sort of looking forward and looking at bigger and better things. When we went out for our executive director search, everybody that was on our search committee really bought in this vision. We want to go to the next level of leadership in Germantown and do more with it. So we want to be not just what we have been in the past, but even more and better. With the Alumni Association does fund us somewhat, but that's not a specific part of their charter. They do fund us yearly based on their own votes and recommendations, unless there's something you know differently when you're talking to them. It's not a guaranteed fund that we get from the Alumni Association. The Alumni Association is a totally separate group and charter, and we have been trying to work on a little closer relationships with them the last years, because once you leave Leadership Germantown, where do you go? Do you go to the Alumni Association then to get involved, or do you get involved on your own? That's the kind of things we're working on. I'll give a little bit of a sidetrack, is that in this, I haven't sidetracked enough already, in that, as we said, we think we could be a bigger and better organization, do more for the city, get more involved, make better things. I would say sort of similar to how at our Germantown Community Theater, how we promised that with the more money you gave us, the more we're going to do with it. And we've already scheduled our second First Responders Night, which is coming up on the 26th of this month. I believe I've contacted everyone to make sure they're invited. Police and fire also there. We've also completed or about to complete our new schedule for next year. I don't think it's been released publicly yet. We're going to do that at the gala coming up. But we have a lot better and bigger shows, because we can actually pay the rights for better shows and bigger shows. So as I see it, we want to be bigger and better and do more. Whatever we're given, we can just do more things with it there. That's my lead on that. Andrew, if you had anything particular to say.
No, just in response to your direct question, the alumni.
Thank you.
I'm a Yankee from Canada, so I'm short and sweet. The Alumni Association has in the past offered us a small scholarship to support one, perhaps two individuals, but it's not an annual budgeting item, and it's a very small percentage of what we need to operate.
How many alumni members are there?
To my knowledge, there's approximately 450 alumni.
And not all of those are active in, in Leadership Germantown itself. We have about an 18-person board. We've had some roll-off, and we're putting back on. So we're a really very small and very hard-working board, and that's another reason we hired this guy. I really want him to take over a lot of those. In case you didn't know, he's supposed to take over a lot of those roles and responsibilities and duties for us.
Well, one of the questions that we get, and that I've gotten every year, is if there are 450 alumni members, is why the alumni members don't simply increase their dues by approximately $30 and fund this amount that's being paid by the city, because not everyone agrees with Leadership Germantown. Some people believe the lines between the charity work and their political activism sometimes blur. Whether that's true or not, I'm just telling you what some of the perception is, and they don't want their tax dollars necessarily going to help subsidize Leadership Germantown. And so if you could actually fund this $13,000 by increasing the alumni members' dues by $30, which isn't a lot of money for these folks up here on the board, why wouldn't you do that rather than asking the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to force the taxpayers to contribute tax dollars to fund the organization?
That's an excellent question, and just to clarify, the 501c3 charter for Leadership Germantown states unequivocally that we are a non-political organization, but I also believe that I can clarify for you the difference between the Leadership Germantown 501c3 and Leadership Germantown Alumni Association, which is a standalone 501c3 of its own making. They are an organization that does ask for membership dues and fees, whereas Leadership Germantown proper is, as Dr. Adams says, we are run by our volunteer board and our specific activities. So we do not have any memberships or any annual fees to collect. So to directly respond to your question, we can't increase the request because we don't currently offer a membership opportunity.
Well, the organization's been around since 1995. You have a lot of very successful people that are part of the organization. I think y'all do some really good work. I just think it's time to cut the strings with the city, be independent of the city. I frankly think that because the Alumni Association contributes some money to the organization, there's a question of whether the members up here who are part of the Alumni Association have a conflict in voting to use city money rather than increasing their alumni dues to help fund the organization. So I just think you would be better off being independent of the city.
Great, and it's a valid point, and I thank you for your comments. And I believe, as Dr. Adams has stated, and one of my goals as coming in as the new program director is actually expanding the organization and moving more towards a 12-month organization and many of the other ideas that we have. Unfortunately, today, we're not there yet. We are still operating as a very small 501c3, but your point is valid and your point is well taken, and I hope to be able to come back to you in a year or several years to say, we don't need the city money, but at this point we really do, because we're on a cusp. We have wonderful people, we have a wonderful alumni, and the name recognition and the value of Leadership Germantown is strong, but we need a little more support as we move forward to take us to the next level.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. I wish you the best. I'm not going to vote to give you the money tonight, but I do want the organization to succeed. I appreciate, all the opportunities that it gave the folks up here on the board and then the citizens in the community. So obviously you've done good work. I just can't vote to give you the money, but I appreciate your frankness.
Well, we are working on our own board and the commitments we can do, and as I said, we want to form more community partners and relationships to do for our funding as opposed to the current model we have right now. We agree that's not our model for the future. We're just trying to get there, that's all.
Any other questions for staff or for Leadership Germantown? Vice Mayor Gibson.
Just a comment, Mayor. Having rolled off the executive board and the board of Leadership Germantown recently, I can speak to several of the questions that have been asked. This past year, $900 was given from LGAA to LG in the form of scholarship for new class members. $500 was a grant for trivia night that they hold that meeting annually. And of the 400 plus alumni of the organization, there are 80 paid alumni members, just like University of Memphis has trouble sometimes holding on to alumni, possibly the University of Tennessee. As well, in a bad football year, that is something that I think that with our new program coordinator, something that we could work on. I look forward to that opportunity. And Mr. Lawton did a great job of saying what Leadership Germantown does for our city, and I'd like to take just a moment to say what it has done for me personally. As a graduate from 2000, at a time when I had 3 youngest children, at home, never considering sitting before you here in this space tonight. It was something that I was able to connect with other members of the community in a deeper way, learn so much that I did not know about a community that I'd grown up in. This is my hometown. I thought I knew an awful lot, but I learned so much more about staff, about organizations that I really was not familiar with before. And so I am fully in support of this grant. I think that there is real opportunity, and Andrew, it was so encouraging to hear you say what could come next, whether it's next year or the next or the next. We as folks who are responsible for a budget, we look forward to you having those wings to soar. But this is a partnership that I believe in. It's a partnership that I think makes us a better city and our community leaders better. Again, in 2000, for me to be able to take those skills that I learned and go back to, whether it was my church, whether it was an organization with my children, it helped me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other questions or comments on this particular item? Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Second time.
Thank you, Mayor. I hear what Alderman Massey is saying, and I do agree. I hope Leadership Germantown can become self-sufficient. I was not on the board that approved the grants in this year's budget, so I wasn't involved in those deliberations or consideration of the issues. I do agree that some of the citizens do have a problem with giving money to nonprofits, but I also agree in some cases it's a good way to help the school system, for instance, the Education Foundation, or some other entity such as that. But I look forward this year to working with the board and looking at our budget formulation that's going to be coming up in the coming months. I want us to take a close look at what we do fund, what we give grants to, and how that process works. Are there actual applications, or does the city decide on its own? You know, there are many other nonprofits right here in town that could benefit from this same amount of money. And so I look forward to looking at how we do that and being involved in that process. So, but I will say today, since this is a transfer of funds, I will vote for it since I was involved in the initial process of the approval, but it's been done by a previous board, and I believe deliberations occurred and discussions occurred, and I just look forward to the coming year and the future of Leadership Germantown, hoping, as Alderman Massey said, that you can become self-sufficient and not ask the taxpayers to continue for years and years to come to provide subsidies.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions? Alderman Yonda.
I'd like to add that the little bit of difference here on this nonprofit is that the city gets an awful lot in return. And that's not necessarily the case with other nonprofits throughout the community. So I'm more than willing to vote for this, and even more if it's necessary to keep this program going. I think that just think of the fountain. It was $70-something thousand, or more. I can't remember at this point. I just know it's a lot of money. But we get this back, and I think that makes it a lot different. So I will be voting for this. Thank you for your service, too.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions or discussions? That's your 2 times on the floor, sir.
I believe I only went once, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Alderman Yonda, for pointing that out. Yes, I should have said, I do know we have a great number of graduates from Leadership Germantown and other organizations that serve on our commissions and provide good benefit to the city staff and our residents here. So I apologize that I didn't mention that before. I do agree with Alderman Yonda. We do get something back for these funds. I don't know if that's the case in all of our grants that we give. I sure hope it is, and I look forward to looking closer at those. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
We look forward to this year's 2019 graduating class of new community leaders and putting them to work. Congratulations. Thank you. Brings us to item number 15 on the agenda, purchase fire engine. Chief Beeman.
Thank you, Mayor and Alderman. This agenda item tonight is to request the approval to purchase a new fire engine from Emergency Vehicle Specialists representing Pierce Manufacturing Incorporated for the amount of $859,539. This purchase will be made through the HGAC Cooperative Purchasing Program. Once the new engine is delivered and placed into service, it'll be utilized next door out of Fire Station 3, and the current fire engine at Fire Station 3, unit number F156, which is 16 years old, will be used for about another 5 years as a backup fire engine. We'll also surplus our oldest backup fire engine, unit number F139, interestingly, a Pierce fire truck that's 28 years old. Our apparatus committee that consists of personnel from the fire department and fleet services evaluated 4 different manufacturers and determined that Emergency Vehicle Specialists representing Pierce Manufacturing to be the most responsive vendor that can provide the best service and warranty support. To help control maintenance costs, we're including a 5-year warranty on most components on the apparatus, and Emergency Vehicle Specialist has a local full-service repair and maintenance facility, and they also do on-site service as needed. The new engine will meet current safety standards and featured an improved climate control cab, storage, pump, and water capacity. The vehicle will also have many improvements, including a compressed air foam system, LED lighting, and reduced exhaust emissions. A new key feature, though, for this apparatus are the built-in elements to help reduce our firefighters' exposure to carcinogens. And the purchase includes most of the loose equipment to replace the aging equipment on the older fire engines. And with the loose equipment are 2 thermal imaging cameras and a battery-operated combination rescue tool similar to the Jaws of Life design of equipment. The apparatus, it's anticipated that the construction is going to take about 12 months. Members of the apparatus committee will travel at least 3 times to the factory in Wisconsin to provide oversight and conduct inspections of the apparatus while it's under construction. This purchase meets the Germantown Forward 2030 public safety goal of having adequate apparatus and equipment to maintain low property loss and no fire deaths. This concludes my presentation, and I stand ready for questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Beeman. Is there a motion to approve the purchase of a custom fire engine along with related equipment from Emergency Vehicle Specialists representing Pierce Manufacturing Incorporated in the amount of $859,539 and to surplus fire engine F-139 when the new apparatus is delivered and placed into service?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Questions or discussion? Alderman Yonda.
Okay, just so I get clarity here, this is going to end up being in another fiscal year. Patrick or Lisa, we're going to have an adjustment for next year?
No, this is in the current year's budget.
But the budget ends in July. Are we going to pay for it up front?
No, sir. There's no prepayment that we're going to make, Alderman Yonda. Lisa, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, sir. The encumbrance process at the end of the year will roll that over, and it'll be rolled over into the new budget. Yes, sir.
Next, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we'd already ordered this.
That's correct. Any other questions for staff? Alderman Sanders, you're recognized.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to point out for our citizens' sake, the trips you mentioned to go to the vendor, that's actually included in the cost of this equipment, correct?
Yes, sir. All trips are included within the price. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Motion and item are approved. I thank the board for their support of public safety in Germantown and maintaining our ISO 1 rating. Thank you, chiefs. We look forward to that engine being delivered up here and getting to take a look at it. Brings us to item number 16 on the agenda, Resolution 19R03, Banking and Signature Cards. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. With the election of new Alderman Sanders on the board, we need to change the names of the individuals who have the ability to sign on the city's checking account and banking funds. The city has 3 basic funds with SunTrust. One is called a concentration account. The other is the accounts payable account, and then the other is the payroll account. The payroll account and the accounts payable have a 0 balance. Everything flows through the concentration account, and when payments are necessary to be made, we will transfer money out of the concentration account into either payroll or accounts payable. But to be able to do that, we do need to have new signatures on the account, so SunTrust can recognize those individuals if they need to sign. Typically, the mayor will sign and I will sign on those items over $10,000, but there's always the opportunity for example, the mayor to be out of office or out of town rather, and we need another signature on that check for those checks that require dual signatures, and those are checks over $10,000. So, and I believe, I think Michelle, you coordinated this, or Leslie did with the board as they came in to sign these signature cards. But that's the action before you, and it does take a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19R03, establishing for bank and signature cards with SunTrust Bank, which will authorize the mayor, alderman, and city administrator as signers on the City of Germantown concentration account, accounts payable, and payroll checks accounts? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda items approved. We move to agenda item number 17, ordinance 2019-5, amendment to zoning ordinance chapter 23, smart code, site standards, first reading and set public hearing. Community and Economic Development Director Cameron Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This item is to address site standards that became an issue over several applications within the smart code. What the Planning Commission approved back in October was to update the existing regulations that pertain to the width of driveways and curb cuts and other parking lot entrance features within smart coded areas. This provides conformance with the needs of the fire department and the fire code, and also alignment with other sections of the smart code. Simply put, section 23792B2 allows for parking lot entrance features to be no wider than 30 feet. So the adjustment that we made in 23793A1 and A3 was to just take it up to that maximum width of 30 feet and then no wider than 30 feet at the frontages for both of those. So that brings it into compliance, allows for a little bit of flexibility and play in designing those driveways. So it could be 24 feet, which is the width of a drive aisle. It could be 26 feet, which is the width of a fire lane aisle, or it could be up to 30 feet, which allows for flexibility for turning in off of major thoroughfares like Poplar or Germantown Road. So that's this amendment to the ordinance in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions. And this does bring us into alignment with 2030, including policies that encourage economic sustainability by creating transparent and clear processes.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 2019-5, amendments to Chapter 23 of the Municipal Code, Germantown Smart Code Ordinance related to driveways, and to set the public hearing for February 11th, 2019? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions for staff? Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
So the way I understand it, we're just taking the 30-foot from the section, is that 792?
Yes, sir.
And including it in 793, so this board won't have to vote on variances?
Warrants, but yes, sir, we're taking the number. We're not copying the same language, but just taking the number of no wider than 30 feet. So again, it allows for that flexibility to work within the confines of a particular development. You know, it may just need 24 or it may need all the way to 30, but that allows for flexibility in design so that it does decrease the number of warrants that we've seen in a couple of applications here in the last 2 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Motion carries and moves to second reading and public hearing. Brings us to item 18 on the agenda, ordinance 2019-6, amendment to zoning ordinance, chapter 23, wireless transmission facility, first reading and set public hearing. Again, Mr. Ross.
Thank you again, Mayor, members of the board. This agenda item pertains to updating the existing regulations related to wireless transmission facilities and their review, and also to ensure conformance with changes in the recently adopted 2018 FCC regulations and state legislator bodies. That's the public charter number 819. In a nutshell, again, this, in regards to FCC regulations, puts us into alignment with state and local fees, state and local requirements that govern small facilities deployment, and states and localities acting in our capacities in order to set terms for wireless infrastructure deployment within our right-of-ways and on private pieces of property. In terms of the adjustments that were made starting in July 1 of 2018, the charter changes allowed for uniform application across the board within right-of-ways and on public facilities in terms of small wireless telecommunication facilities. They applied fees and rates that were permitted. Application requirements allowed them to batch those. That means they can bring them in up to 20 at a time. We have to review up to 20 at a time based on a small window. That's the time limit, the shot clock. There are general limitations, but those limitations are general. We do not have much of a say in that as part of how we review it when it goes within our right-of-way as well as on public and private property. What we do have the ability to determine as part of approving this ordinance language is the ability to know when they go in and where they're going in within our right-of-way, and to apply aesthetic standards that will be regulated by our design review policy documents. So we can tell them what we want them to look like instead of them just coming in with a standard creosote utility pole and putting something on top of it. We can determine how they look. The other text amendment, and really this boils down to two requests that the Planning Commission approved in November at their meeting. First is to allow a more streamlined administrative review process for the development department in terms of existing wireless transmission facilities. Over 2018, this board saw more than a dozen minor modification and equipment upgrades going in. This would allow for staff to review those applications, do the same checks and balances that were being done before they came to this board for approval of those minor modifications and equipment upgrades. It would allow for the Director of Economic and Community Development to approve those administratively, seeing that they met those standards, which do include the screening and making sure that all equipment is kept clean, that the facilities are not unsightly, that they meet the standards that they were approved on. That would reduce the number of agenda items that have been brought forward. We could still provide this information to the public through a variety of means, but we see this as a way to work with the shot clock regulations that are also part of the approval process, that if this board doesn't approve those, no matter how fast or slow it takes staff to review it, if we don't get these approved by this board in a specific amount of time, they're approved automatically. That's the shot clock regulation there. So we want to streamline that so that we're not bound by the BMA BMA agenda schedules. And then again, establishing those policies and procedures for the placement of those facilities that allow us to simply know when they're going to go in and where they're going to go in and govern the way that they look. Staff has worked with the City Attorney's Office on crafting this legislation based on standard language that was produced by the state of Tennessee and MTAS, and we feel comfortable with what we put forward that aligns with Germantown ordinances, Germantown policies, and the direction that we as a city want to go, but also works with those state regulations and the FCC regulations. And this does meet 2030 guidelines related to technology, including infrastructure that supports and sustains individual educational, government, or business demands, as well as city services and finance strategic objectives responsible for physical assets. We do believe that the stewardship of city assets is responsible and essential to deliver high-quality service to our customers consistently as well as effectively, and this regulation would help us do that. Open for any questions.
Well stated, Mr. Ross. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 2019-6, amendments to the Germantown ordinance related to wireless transmission facilities, and to set February 11th, 2019 as the public hearing date? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this particular item? Vice Mayor Gibson, you have the floor.
That was me waving. Mr. Ross, thank you. Thank you for meeting with me this past week, as well as our IT director, Mr. Fisher. I was able to share my concerns with you as far as this potentially changing the landscape of our beautiful city, as far as the number of carriers, the number of requests that could come within a very short, a very small area. We discussed what I thought would be a great solution, and I know others have gone before us on this with talking with MLGW to use the existing utility pole that is already in place and not getting much headway there. And so I do have a question I'll ask you in just a second, but also an encouragement to our administration and to Mayor to possibly look at a concerted conversation with MLGNW about that. Again, it doesn't just affect us. It is a statewide law that there will be other communities as these things come online that, given the import, I think that we can make our pleas known. Cameron, can you remind us what the process is in that negotiation, or how that negotiation is, just to your recollection or limited knowledge, with MLGNW?
So at this point, we don't know much in terms of what carriers have discussed with MLGW. We just know that the public utilities were excluded from 819 at the state level, and so they are able to negotiate with carriers on rates to go on the existing infrastructure. And so they have one price and the carriers have another, and they have yet to reach a compromising number at that point. We have not been a part of those negotiations. We are only aware that they are occurring at this point.
Thank you, that's helpful. And one of the things that came out in our conversation is that the legislature did set forth an amount of what a municipality would receive for that small tower, which again, that is set in stone. It would have been much more helpful had they not chosen to exclude, or had chosen differently. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other questions on this particular item? Alderman Massey, you have the floor. You're recognized.
Mr. Ross, I don't think we as a board can control what MLGNW does with the placement of this equipment on their property, can we?
We cannot. We can only ask nicely.
Right.
And MLGW has the same rights, essentially, that the state gave to the cellular providers to put up poles in our right-of-way at specific intervals. MLGW has, in fact, done this with a wireless transmission facility across from Fire Station 4 that is just a simple wooden utility pole that has wireless equipment on top of it.
So just to clarify for the people at home, if MLGNW wants to come in and put utility poles up in various areas of the city, they have the right to do that. And we, neither the board nor the citizens, will be able to control that if we determine that it's just unsightful. Is that correct?
That is correct. This language, I don't mean to jump in, this language would help us to regulate that a little bit more. Currently, there is no legislation in place to allow us to regulate that at all. This, however, relates specifically to wireless transmission facilities, but as they move to smart meters and other devices that require information to be transmitted wirelessly, they would fall into the same wireless aesthetic standards that is set forth intentionally in this ordinance modification.
And we've discussed this before. Director Fisher and I had the conversation. But really what we are preparing for, or what the state is preparing for, what MLGNW is doing, is preparing the community, the state, for the 5G network, which I believe is referred to as the Internet of Things. It's going to control things like you mentioned, I think, smart cars, smart meters. There are a number of applications for which 5G will be used, but we're not putting a bunch of small cell towers all over Germantown for the purpose of improving cellular reception, because there's a misconception about this, that our current 4G phones are suddenly going to realize improvement in reception by virtue of the fact that we have these small cell towers all over the city, and that's not true at this point. At some point in the future, maybe that will change, but the purpose is actually to increase connectivity for internet usage. Is that correct?
So they are, my understanding is they are doing those to provide 5G coverage, but in many areas, and I've personally seen it, the small cells are also supporting the 4G, kind of the older, what's current right now. So they are helping reception in areas. I can't tell you whether these carriers or the applications that they put in specifically will do that, but as a general rule, many of the small cells that are going in do provide 4G service, which is the current technology today.
Do you have any indication for what these small cell towers will look like from a density standpoint in our neighborhoods? For example, I have street lights, every 50 feet, let's say, in our neighborhood. So the question that's been asked is, how many of our existing street lights are suddenly going to see these small cell towers on them?
Under 819, the regulations approved by the state, it could be one small cell facility every 50 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Gibson, follow up? Yes, it's your second time on the floor.
Just again to follow up, currently there is not a plan in place through the carriers nor the MLG&W who do own those poles for it to be that. So what the carrier can do, if I understand this correctly, they can come in and put another wireless facility close to the current pole. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, assuming that the appropriate fiber optic network is there.
Exactly, and I believe, Mr. Fisher, if you could speak to the number of carriers that could come in and again be all there together.
Well, currently there's 5 carriers that serve Germantown.
Yes, sir.
We have heard from one of them that has interest in putting applications in. We've not heard from the others, but it's certainly a possibility if they decide to do it.
And would those all be separate poles as they go in?
They could conceivably, the carriers could choose to co-locate on the poles, and that is something that is possible, but I don't believe the state legislation requires it that they do that, and I don't know that our ordinance.
But it's within their discretion that they could have a mono carrier.
A lot of them use different technologies, different frequencies. Sometimes it's a technical issue of trying to co-locate those together on such a small cell site rather than a want to.
Right. The thought being with the MLG&W situation, as far as being able to utilize something that we already have in place. We already have those utility poles there, rather than adding one more obstruction. That was my thought, and I appreciate all the time that y'all spent with me this week.
Certainly, and I would just to comment, we have been talking to the carriers, and one of the things that we do encourage them as we're looking at these is finding ways to put them on existing items that are already there. So we're looking at existing places to put those, so it's not a new pole in the ground.
Mr. Fisher, and I know the one location that you mentioned at the hospital on Germantown Road.
Yes, ma'am.
That being a potential where
there's already street lights or there's a pole for the traffic signals, things like that. Anywhere that we can go onto an existing pole or some sort of existing structure, we're certainly encouraging that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. You have the floor.
I too share the concerns of what our communities can look like if we end up having numerous additional poles to support these towers between every streetlight. Can we, if we have our mast arms for our streetlights or existing poles that aren't MLG&W, can we require them to use those poles rather than installing a new?
this ordinance language allows us to push that as the option of first resort and finding other available options similar to that before simply placing a new pole in the ground. You know, the other thing that 819 allowed for at the state level approval was up to 50 feet tall, being the height of these poles, depending on surrounding structures. So if a street light is 30 feet tall, these poles would have to remain within that 30-foot regulation based on the aesthetic standards sorry, that's a previous slide, but based on the aesthetic standards that is we have put forward within our ordinance. That was really the only flexibility that the state guidelines allowed municipalities to have, is to determine that if there's black mast arms in the area, we can require these carriers to have black decorative elements to them so that they blend in a little bit better, or that they're 30 feet tall and they resemble a light post. And since they'll be wired for power, we could even ask that they add a light to it so that there's more light on our street. So we are looking for tandem benefits, but to directly answer your question, there could be more poles in there regardless.
And 819, you said, kind of sets the fees. I didn't see a fee in this ordinance.
$200.
Missed it.
Yes, sir. It is. $200 is what the state allows municipalities to collect.
And you talked about them being able to bundle an application, 20 apiece. Would that be the one fee, the $200, or each?
Each is $200.
And Mr. Fisher, do you know, I agree that it's mostly related to the 5G rollout, but is there an optimal height for those to operate? Do you know off the top of your head, like, could they be the height of a street sign that we currently have in the city? They could utilize those speed limit sign or a stop sign?
From a safety standpoint, I don't think you'd want it that low because you wouldn't want someone to be that close to it. But I guess my answer in general would be that the carriers would determine that based on an engineering study, and that would have a lot to do with what's around it, the topography, the trees, the structures, and things around it that would help them determine how tall they wanted to make that structure.
And am I correct, these small cell transmission facilities will have to be much more numerous than what a large mega tower? These
Yes, sir.
will transmit back to those big towers.
Typically, they'll communicate with them over fiber optic cable, so they're.
That means we're going to have a lot more.
Yes,
than
sir.
what we're seeing now.
Yes, sir. These cover a small area.
Well, I too agree with Alderman Gibson's thinking that, you know, well, I just hate to see our city having, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, probably, of these poles popping up in our neighborhoods. And I guess there's nothing we can do about it if the FCC and this public charter 819's already been passed. But this ordinance is put together well enough, I guess, to give us as much control as we can possibly have. I feel better about it, but I do have the concern of what we're going to look like down the road.
Oh.
Can they be placed on the side of a building?
Yes, sir. Again, we have had the fortunate opportunity of working with a carrier at this point that is trying to work with us to find facilities other than just dropping them down in the right-of-way. And they haven't, as of July 1, they could have just brought in a batch of 20 applications and said, here. But they have not done that either. They've waited for this to come in place so that we could move forward with a clear direction, and they recognize the importance of these things to our community as well. So they're, again, working with us.
And Mr. Fisher, do you envision that as this progresses, is this something the new Technology Commission will be assisting in any way with the city looking at any of
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we certainly want to do is look at how we can improve sailor coverage and capacity in the city, but also deal with these kind of issues. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for staff? Forrest?
Yeah, I know the hour's late, Alderman Owens. To you. Thank you.
I corrected myself. Thank you. It's getting late, like you mentioned.
It is, and I won't belabor this. I just wanted to say, we're going to talk about this in the second reading of the public hearing, I'm sure, a great deal. So just Mr. Ross, Mr. Fisher, Ms. Pounder's incredible work that you guys have done in a very short turnaround, being very responsive to what I consider to be nothing short of a crisis that we're about to experience in our city. I don't have the same fear after much discussion that we're going to receive 1,000 of these type of implementations. I mean, it's my understanding that the city of Memphis, I know we are putting our application process in place, but the city of Memphis may or may not have had theirs in place, but they received 300 applications at once and had to immediately respond to that, whereas you guys are already out front of this, and albeit limited, at least we will be able to regulate to some extent location and aesthetics and placement, certainly not to the extent we would like. But if we didn't have this, my understanding is that they just come in and put them wherever they want, and we have no say. And so this is a lot of work that you guys have done in a short period of time, and I congratulate you and thank you for that. I wish we could do more, like my fellow aldermen have stated, and maybe in the future we can look to lobbying the state legislator towards that effect. That's it.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions for staff? Please call the roll.
Mayor, I do. I thought
Yes,
Alderman Yonda had
Massey,
something.
It's your second time to have the floor. Go ahead.
Sure. So, quick question for you, Director Fisher. You were recently appointed to a board, I believe, that's part of the FCC. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, does that create any conflicts with you serving on the telecommunications or providing oversight of any of these decisions in the city?
No, sir. The board that I'm on is looking at resiliency and disasters, and not really looking at how these things are legislated or done.
And how did you receive that appointment?
I was
recommended?
I was recommended and appointed by the FCC chairman.
Okay. Did someone else have to recommend you to the FCC chairman?
No, sir. I applied to that.
You applied for it yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my concern, well, let's just talk about the language to begin with, and I will be brief with this, but what this amendment does is it takes the language, currently it says no building permit shall be issued or construction initiated without the administrative review and approval of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So what the city of Germantown, or what the administration has asked the board to do, is take the Board of Mayor and Aldermen out of that process. And so what we're doing at that point is to remove the people's elected representatives from that decision-making process at that point. Now, we may enter back in later on, but I have a problem in taking those decisions that should be made by elected, or that are currently made by elected representatives who are directly responsible and accountable to the citizens, and giving that authority to members of staff who are responsible and accountable only to the city administrator, and the city administrator is directly accountable to the mayor. And so in some respects, I think that this change actually reduces possibly transparency, and the fact that you're taking some of the people's elected representatives out of the loop at that point, and we can communicate directly with the people that we represent. You are reducing the accountability in the sense that we're taken out of the loop at that point, and you're being asked to feed us information that we once received directly. And I'm just not sure that that's something that we want to do as a city. One of the questions I have about the actual language, there is no underline of the language immediately preceding economic community development. which was added. Wasn't that language also added?
No, sir. The approval of the department was initially part of the language, but department was meant to imply the Department of Development, so staff chose to clarify that it would be the Department of Economic and Community Development, since we are the department that reviews all of these applications, because they, as mentioned in the presentation and in the staff report to the board, the only request for administrative review is for the minor modifications and the simple equipment upgrades. It's not for any new wireless transmission facilities. Those have to go through a significant process, starting with the Board of Zoning Appeals and ending with this board for their installation and construction. The small cell facilities can go in tomorrow if they wanted to. What we're trying to do tonight is regulate that so that they have to come in and fill out an application with us. So as mentioned again in the staff report and in the presentation, this is a twofold request from the Planning Commission, and that's to increase the efficiency of review for those minor modifications and equipment upgrades. Staff is still going to do everything that we were doing in terms of checking the facility to make sure that it conforms with the approval granted by the Planning Commission and the Design Review Commission in terms of placement and aesthetics associated with those. And we can report back which facilities did receive those upgrades in a way to be determined by the board. We saw this as, again, over a dozen agenda sheets that came to this board for simple things. And so we were trying to streamline processes that were on time clocks anyway. So that's the only administrative review that's part of the change in the ordinance language.
Okay. Your answer has raised two more questions for me. One, does this ordinance apply both to our old zoning and smart growth, or are we going to have to come back and also amend?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Wireless transmission facility applies to all zoning, regardless of whether it's either standard zoning or the smart coded areas.
Okay.
It still is going to have to follow these processes laid out.
And has the city attorney determined whether or not, in this case, the city of Germantown can act as the applicant to request this change? Now, Mr. Ross, I think you said it was the Planning Commission that requested the change, but on the application, it's showing the city of Germantown. And I just want to make sure that it's correct, because we had some question about whether or not the city of Germantown could act as the applicant for some of the smart growth amendments that were requested. So can the city of Germantown act as the applicant to request this amendment?
I would have to get back with you on that. We've had a different section of our firm, other than where I am, look at this question. So if you would just allow me a little time to get you that answer, I'd sure appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for staff on this particular agenda item? Go ahead, you have the floor. This is your second time to have the floor.
So, Mr. Ross, just so I understand the answer you were just giving Alderman Massey, I think you were referring to under 2386C3, where he's talking about the underlying economic community development on that first page of the ordinance.
Yes, sir.
And you're saying that applies to minor modifications of current facilities that are out there, like changing the antenna that normally has come here and had to be approved.
Correct.
And that avoids this board having to approve small changes like that.
Things that were generally on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
The motion carries, and it moves to second reading and public hearing. Brings us to item 19 on the agenda, which was originally item E on the consent agenda. Item E is, and now 19, Professional Services Agreement, Supplement Number 4, Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road, Intersection Improvements Project. Mr. Lawton, are you taking this?
Yes, Mayor and Board. Under the background section of this agenda item, you can see the history of this project in terms of the design work associated with making the necessary improvements at Wolf River Boulevard and Germantown Road, beginning with the preliminary environmental engineering work in June of 2014. Also included in the background in that box there where we have the numbers are the different supplemental contracts that we brought back to this body for your approval, for your consideration and approval. This evening, we're bringing back to you one more, and that is in the amount of $9,000 to increase the contract with our design firm, Buchard Horn, increasing the amount from $279,856 to $288,856. Again, the $9,000 referenced earlier. The reason for the increase has to do with the the National Environmental Policy Act work that was done in relationship to this project to make sure, working with the various agencies in the area, Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, Corps of Engineers, others, to make sure that there was not going to be a detrimental environmental impact on this project. That was first and foremost. However, and we did receive that permit from the state to go forward. However, that permit for the environmental work expired December 2nd, 2017. So the state has requested that we go back and perform another update to this, it's called the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act work, to make sure that we have that in place and submit that as we're moving forward with construction documents. So again, the change order before you this evening is to increase that professional services contract by that amount. During the executive session, as I was presenting this very quickly, question came up about the timing of this project and where we are today and having to go back and do this level of work. Most of that has to do with the costs associated with the project. Keep in mind that this is 100% reimbursable by the state of Tennessee, but we had to move the budget dollars over the course of several fiscal years, so dollars that we thought would be available for construction of the intersection improvements in one fiscal year, we ended up using those dollars in the prior fiscal year to actually obtain the necessary right-of-way, the 31 pieces of right-of-way necessary for this improvement. So all along, the project has been moved back and moved back, not any result of staff's efforts, absolutely not, but it more has to do with obtaining the funding, first of all, from the Metropolitan Planning Organization as they look at other dollars available to take from other projects in the area to help fund this project, and then absolutely concurrence by the state of Tennessee to apply those project dollars from other sources to our project. But that's where we are this evening, Mayor, and staff recommends approval of this supplemental agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve supplement number 4 to a professional services agreement with Buchard Horn Incorporated in the amount of $9,000, increasing the contract amount from $279,856 to $288,856 for an additional environmental services related to Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road intersection improvements project? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions for staff? Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
Just one real quick one. The original assessment was gave us clearance for 3 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this new one will do the same?
I believe the time amount is the same, yes, sir.
So we expect construction to start within that time?
We hope.
Yes.
So
and
we
Tim
don't have to do
Gwaltney
this
guarantees it.
Okay,
Right?
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion carries. The city and the staff do appreciate the support on this particular item. It is a project that's long overdue and it will bring some relief to Wolf River and Germantown Road. We've reached the conclusion of our meeting this evening. We do welcome our new city attorney, Mac McCarroll, and our new alderman, Scott Sanders. Also like to thank our reserves, Eric, Al, Ed, and who'd I leave off? George. Thank you for protecting us tonight. Good evening, folks.